On September 18, 2017, Nature Geoscience published a paper titled "Emission Budgets and Pathways Consistent with Limiting Warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius". The authors of the paper mentioned the IPCC's fifth assessment report, which stated that for total anthropogenic warming to remain below 1.5 degrees Celsius in more than 66% of its members, the cumulative CO2 emissions from 1870 had to remain below 615 gigatons of carbon. However, around 545 gigatons of carbon had already been emitted by the end of 2014. This meant that the remaining carbon budget to prevent the 1.5 degrees Celsius rise was around 70 GTC from January 2015, which is obtained by subtracting the already spent 545 GTC from the cumulative limit of 615 GTC. According to the authors, the IPCC's analysis was not quite correct. The paper pointed out that the mean CMIP5 response cumulative emissions do not reach 545 GTC until after 2020, calling this an important discrepancy. The paper points out another thing, quote, "However, this reference period and the GCM ensemble used in this table are not identical to the ESM ensemble used to derive estimates of the carbon budget", end quote, pointing out that two different ensembles were used to arrive at the carbon budget left. Providing for corrections, paper opined, quote, "This allows more CO2-induced warming for the same total, increasing the median TEB of the CMIP5 distribution for an additional 0.6 degrees Celsius to 303 GTC and the 66th percentile to 242 GTC." End quote. Thus the relevant statistic here is that for 66th percentile, the carbon budget from January 2015 is, according to the study, 242 GTC and not 70 GTC as previously estimated. That is an error of around 245.7%. It is like getting two things out of every three statements that you make wrong. After the study was published on September 18, the anthropogenic global warming skeptics began to use this study to push their side of the narrative, causing a ruffle in climate alarmist community, which took it upon itself to make an apologia. Potholer 54 is such a climate alarmist. He is the protector of the mainstream science, fighting against the fringe viewpoints and the harm they cause to the world. So much so that Potholer 54 produced a video debunking the news outlets reporting on the paper in just a week after the study was published, so much so that he did not even sort out his sources. Such dedication. The crusade of Potholer 54 against nonsense on internet and the unsourced stuff that is against mainstream science is like a holy war, except that the gravity of such situation makes it okay for him to include misrepresentations and deceit. Thus, for Potholer 54, an error of over 245% is not so significant as to not call climate science a science. Of course it was science when the error was in the science, and now it is still the science. It is always the science, and scientists do not have to answer for the errors they make, because unlike pseudoscience, science changes. And because it changes, it is okay that it is erroneous. Science is like a bad child. You cannot expect good behavior from it, so any bad behavior is forgivable. Of course, the line is always that such behavior will be improved in future. Such nice words said only Ponzi scheme scammers are the only group able to say that. So when Podholer 54 titles the video, did scientists really just admit to exaggerating global warming and answers it by a resounding no, Podholer 54 is correct according to his worldview. The error of 245% is not an exaggeration, nor it shows incompetence of scientists. It just is, and if you don't think this much error is acceptable, then you are peddling nonsense, specifically unsourced nonsense. This much error is enough for it to be called science, as long as it is mainstream. If it is not mainstream, then Potholer 54 will thoroughly rebuke you for every percent error you commit. Potholder 54 is the true gatekeeper of the mainstream science, a field requiring zero individual thinking. Not only the previous studies got total carbon budget remaining wrong, but it is interesting that they got the total window of time that humans have to control the 1.5 degrees Celsius rise wrong.
The study was published last week in Nature Geoscience by Millar et al. And looks at the cumulative carbon budget, specifically how much carbon needs to accumulate in the atmosphere before average global temperature rises by 1.5 degrees centigrade from 1870 levels. What they found was that the accumulated carbon needed to reach this level is probably much higher than had been previously estimated. At the current rate of carbon accumulation, the study says we'll probably reach that level in about 20 years' time. That kicks the can down the road about another 13 years, giving us, as the authors describe it, a bit more breathing space.